Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Jackson, and today we're going to talk about John Keats, another one of the Romantic poets that we've been looking at. You can see from this slide that John Keats had a very short life. He only lived to be 26 years old, which is, quite sad. And so most of the time when people talk about Keats, they'll talk about, the fact that he died so young and that he could have reached even greater heights had he lived longer and been able to write even more than he did. But he died really, really young. This is a life mask of him. I love to show my students those because in an age before photography, these life masks let us see a little bit more how somebody really looked. I've always thought he was rather handsome. He was also a very small person. He probably was just a little bit over 5 feet tall, so he was not a really tall guy. And Keats was trained as a doctor. So, because the um, anniversary of his death is going to be kind of celebrated among literary scholars next year in 2021, or it's December of 2020 right now when I'm recording this. But scholars, people like me who do this professionally, are going to be paying a lot of attention to Keats. That happens anytime there's an anniversary of a famous writer's birth or death. Scholars in that field tend to kind of celebrate that person by looking at different aspects of their career. And there's been a lot of focus just in the past few years about Keats as a physician and how that impacted his writing. He didn't really set up a very profitable practice at all because he was a lot more interested in writing poetry. And, as you can imagine, that's not a money making business for most people. I mean, if he were alive now, he'd be flush because people know who he is and they study his poetry and people read his poetry all the time. But that didn't happen except in a really small way while he was living. He did know a lot of famous people, kind of ran around with a lot of famous people a little bit. He knew Percy Bysshe Shelley, Mary Shelley's husband. He knew Mary Shelley. He knew Lord Byron, another Romantic poet. He met Wordsworth, and Wordsworth thought that Keats had a lot of promise, except for the sorry people he ran around with, is what Wordsworth said. So he knew people, and people knew that he was a poet who had a lot of promise, but he didn't get a lot of money during his lifetime from his writing. Um, the reason he died so young is because he had tuberculosis. And tuberculosis was a scourge in the 19th century, and up until the 20th century, it was the AIDS of its day. And I say that because people didn't really, when AIDS first started to be known, people didn't know how you got it. They didn't know how you transmitted it. There were lots of rumors about how you could catch it and a lot of uncertainty. But tuberculosis is a viral infection, and once it gets really progressed, it settles into your lungs. And some of the distinctive features of somebody who has tuberculosis or TB, or sometimes it's referred to as consumption because it would literally consume your life. But some of the hallmarks of TB are that the person who has it develops a deep, rattly cough. And in the final stages of the disease, they start to cough up blood. Well, Keats was a doctor, and once he started to cough up blood, he said, I'm a doctor. I know that color. That's arterial blood, and I'm going to die. So, he had a lot of anxiety about maybe trying to write more, trying to do more, being worried that he hadn't been able to accomplish what he wanted to during his life. And an event that kind of exacerbated that, he lived in the northern part of London, by the way. This is Hampstead Heath, where he lived, and this is his house, the house that he rented it. He did not own this, and he only lived in part of it. But it's now open as a permanent museum to him. I've been multiple times. It's lovely. This is a bigger picture of it. This is his room. the sitting room. But part of what I was going to say that exacerbated his illness was his relationship with this woman. She lived in the house next door, Fanny Braun, and they fell in love. Her family was poor. Keats had no money. They would have had no money to live on, and so they could not afford to be married. And, that made his anxiety greater, certainly, for sure. This is the engagement ring that he gave her. So they were engaged, but they were never able to marry. There's a wonderful film called Bright Star. If you like biopics, this is a great one to watch. It's very romantic about his relationship with Fanny Braun, and the fact that they were not able to marry each other because he knew he was ill. 2 of the last years of his life are referred to as the great year because he wrote a lot of the bulk of his poetry that we have. He wrote during that time period was rather prolific because he knew his time was short, and then he needed to get things rolling on that. So here's again what he said about coughing up blood. I'm a doctor. I know what that is. I'm going to die. One of the only things that people during that time period knew to do for somebody who was sick like that was to try to send them to a dry and warm climate. And so this young man, Joseph Severin, who really did not know Keats very well, volunteered to go to Italy with Keats. Some of Keats's friends raised some money to send him to Italy where the climate was going to be warmer and drier to try to see if they couldn't cure him. Of course, by the time he got there, he was too far gone. But they lived in this house right where that red flag is. Now, that is now the Keats Shelley house at the Spanish Steps in Rome. I've not been there, not yet. There's another picture of it. Another picture of the outside. See, here's the building right here, and these are the Spanish Steps and the fountain. And this is another picture of an interior room. And this is a sketch. Joseph Severin, who went with Keats, was an artist. And so several paintings that we have and several drawings that we have of Keats, Severin did as Keats was sick. And Keats did die in Italy, and he's buried in Italy in the Protestant graveyard. This is his tombstone, and he asked to have that tombstone engraved on it. And it's right here. Here lies one whose name was writ in water. Well, if your name is written in water, it's not permanent. And that's what he thought, that his name wouldn't be permanent. And isn't it a lovely thing that his name is permanent and that we know him and that we're still talking about him 200 years after he passed away at the age of 26. There's another picture of the grave. And Joseph Severin, when he died, is buried right next to his friend, which I think is, that's nice to know that they're together. Here's one of Keats's letters to Fanny Braun. She kept those letters, and after she died, her family published them, which was very controversial. A lot of people thought it was super inappropriate that she would have kept those because she married somebody else, and they just thought she should have gotten rid of those letters because she married another man. But thank goodness she kept them because we know a lot about him from those letters that he wrote to her. We don't have any of the ones she wrote to him, but we do have his letters, and that's a wonderful thing that we have them. So, an important thing to understand before we start to read this poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn, is that as a poet, Keats is writing about wanting permanence in a world of change. Well, if we think about this is a young man who died at 26, and both his mother and his brother also had TB, and he nursed them until they died, and his father died when he was quite young. So this is a man who's lost a lot of things, has had to lose the love of his life because he doesn't have enough money to marry her. It makes sense that he'd want to try to find something that's permanent in this ever-changing world. The older I've gotten, the more I appreciate that aspect of this poem, and I'll talk about why in just a few minutes. But that's something that's super important to know, and it really has an impact on how we look at Ode on a Grecian Urn. So if you haven't already printed out a copy of the poem, stop the video for a minute, go print a copy of the poem, especially if you think you want to write your paper about this poem. It's going to make it easier on you to take some notes. So go print it out. I'll wait here. I'll be here when you get back. Okay. Before we look at the poem itself, I want us to think about the title of the poem. First of all, it's an ode. An ode is a type of lyric poem. It always has an important topic. All right, so a lyric poem, we know from our study of Romantic poetry that lyric is a difficult form. It's one that the Romantics valued. So right away, before we even look at this poem, we know that this is a poem about, it's in a difficult format to write, and it's about an important topic. Okay, so we know that. So it's an ode. And then it's Grecian. Well, last semester we learned about the Greek and Romans a lot, and we know that we still revere, in Western culture, we still revere the Greeks and Romans as being the epitome of knowledge and sophistication, and we look to them for a lot of models in how to live our lives in a really good way. So now we're compiling that. We've got an ode, a hard form about an important topic. Grecian, this must have something to say to us about some type of model that's existed for a long, long time because it's so well done. And then it's an urn. Well, an urn is a type of pottery, or it could be a type of container, and typically it's used to contain the ashes of somebody who's died. Okay, so we know from the title of the poem, important topic, hard format, something that stood the test of time in terms of Grecian, and it's an urn, so it has something to do with death and with marking that and with honoring that. So we already know a lot about the poem before we even start to read it. Now, this is an urn that's in the Louvre. We don't know if Keats was writing about this urn. I'm not sure that he went to France or would have had an opportunity to have seen this urn. I kind of doubt that he was able to travel much because he never had that much money. This is his sketch of an urn. But part of what Keats seems to be writing about in this poem is that art stands the test of time, and that we can turn to art over and over and over for comfort, and that it doesn't change. So you and I could go and look at this urn and think, it looks just the same to me as it did to Keats or the millions of people who filed past this thing in the Louvre in Paris and have seen it. It doesn't change. And that would have been comforting to him, this young man who died at 26. Now, again, before we start to read the poem, I want you to think about it. I don't know about you, but as we've been home during the pandemic, I've found that there have been movies and TV shows and books and music that I've turned to over and over again because I find it comforting on some level. And you may, for instance, I like to watch Friends just as much as the next person, but my favorite episode is the one where the characters are saying they don't know that we know that we know that Monica and Chandler have been together. I just find that hysterically funny. And even though I've seen it a whole bunch of times, I'll stay up when I'm hardly able to stay awake to watch the scene at the end when Phoebe says, I didn't know you were in love. I thought you were just fooling around. I just like that. And so I'm waiting for that moment. And I suspect strongly that each of you has something like that you wait, and you are waiting for that little moment because there's something about it that speaks to you on some level. It moves you. And I want you to kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we look at this poem. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's get our copy of the poem and pull that up. Ode on a Grecian urn. We already know some stuff about it, okay? So, first of all, this poem is written in the form of an apostrophe, not an apostrophe like in punctuation. An apostrophe in poetry is when a human is speaking to something that can't speak back to it. So, something that's inanimate, like a piece of art, like the weather, something that can't talk back to us as humans, right? And Keats is not necessarily the speaker. The speaker could be any person. Thou still unravished bride of quietness. Unravished means not touched physically. So we could even boil that down to virgin, a virgin bride, And traditionally, brides were supposed to be virgins. That doesn't always happen. That's okay. But thou still unravished bride of quietness. Well, an urn's quiet because it can't talk, right? Right. Thou foster child of silence and slow time. Foster child. Well, a foster child would be one that wasn't yours biologically. Some people could interpret it as a stand-in child, substitute child. Okay, those things are there. Thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian. Sylvan, we've run into that word with Wordsworth. Sylvan means wooded. So apparently on this urn there's pictures of trees carved on it. Sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. Well, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I can look at the urn and imagine things, and I can come up with 10 million things, and they'd be different than the 10 million things you came up with. Sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape, of deities or mortals or of both? In Tempe or the dales of Arcady, those are cities that would have been in Greece. What men or gods are these? What maidens loath? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? So the speaker is saying, hey, Ern, what's up? What's on you? How am I supposed to understand this? I see a bunch of stuff on it. I'm going to have to look at it closer to see if I can figure out the story or see if there is a story, or is it just stuff on the urn? But really, it's the speaker forming an apostrophe, saying something to this urn, knowing that the urn can't speak back. Okay, I'm going to grab a sip of water. All right, here we go. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Now, that to me seems to be an important line. Our imagination is often better than the reality. If you've ever had a crush on somebody, and if you haven't, you should, because having a crush is pretty fun. It's attention without intention, right? If you have a crush on somebody, in your mind, you're completely in control. And so when you think about that person's always interested in what you're interested in and hates what you hate, and they respond the way that you want them to. And if you start to think about kissing them, then they kiss the way that you want them to. And they never have bad breath. And they never say your hair looks weird or what's up with that pimple. They don't do that. So heard melodies are sweet. Having somebody say you're really hot, that's great. But imagining it, sometimes that can be even better, right? Because you're in control. You're in the driver's seat. That would be real attractive to somebody who knows they don't have very long to live. All right, just thinking about that. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, you soft pipes, play on. So apparently there's a picture of somebody playing pipes on this earth, right? I can't hear you, but I can imagine it. And because I'm the one who can imagine it, I'm going to make it be a song that I like and not a song that I hate. Not to the sensual ear, not to my real ear, but in your brain, you can hear a song. If you like a song, you can start singing it in your head without actually hearing it because we have the ability to imagine. Not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit. Ditties of no tone. Again, if you're stressed out and maybe you start thinking of a song you like, it can speak to your spirit and soothe you. It can. It can make you feel better. That's the reason we like to listen to music, right? All right. Now the speaker is continuing. Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Well, that can happen because the picture is on the urn. And so everything that's on it is going to stay exactly the way it is because it's an urn. The type of urn that I showed you in the picture would have been carved out of marble. It would have been cold. Marble, is going to stay the way that it is forever. So if there's a picture of a guy playing a pipe on this, playing like a flute, he's always going to be playing that flute. He's not going to put it down and walk away because he's on an urn, for Pete's sake. All right. Fair youth, beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, say there's a guy chasing a girl on this urn. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal. Yet do not grieve, she cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Yeah, you're caught chasing this chick on this urn that's never going to change, but guess what? She's always going to be good looking. She's not going to get gray hair. She's not going to get out of shape. She's going to look exactly the way you like her. So be happy. You're still going to be chasing her. She's still going to be good looking. Isn't that great? Because it's on an urn and it can't change. All right, speaker's still looking at the urn. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu. The leaves can't change because they're on an urn. You see where I'm heading with this? Everything I ask you, pretty much the answer is going to be because it's on an urn, okay? Your leaves nor ever bid the spring adieu, and happy melodiest, unwearied, forever piping song ever new, because he's on an urn. More happy love, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever panting and forever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning head and a parching tongue. Well, to be cloyed means to be that you are so satisfied that you're more than satisfied. It's like, say that you were hungry for pizza and you felt like you could eat 8 pieces of pizza and you ate 10, then you would be cloyed. You would be more than satisfied. Okay? So if you're ever loving and still panting, you're going to be happy because you're on the urn, because you're cloyed and satiated and happy. And you're always going to have a burning forehead and a parching tongue because you're still hot for this person. It's not going to cool off. It's not going to turn into ordinary, everyday life. It's going to be that exciting part. And the exciting part's pretty stinking great. Some people like it so much because that kind of euphoria doesn't last. It passes. I mean, other things come along, they're great. But boy, that beginning stuff, that's hard to beat. It really is. All right. The speaker's going to continue speaking to the urn. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? Maybe now the speaker's looking at a different part of the urn. To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer, lowing at the skies, and all her silken planks with garlands dressed? Okay, so apparently there's a picture of a guy on the urn leading a cow somewhere, and the cow has like a necklace of flowers around it. Maybe there's some kind of celebration going on. What little town by river or seashore or mountain built with peaceful citadel is emptied of this folk, this pious morn? Hey, what's going on? Where are all the other people? What's happening in this city that, there's this guy chasing this chick and somebody is playing the flute, and another guy's dragging a cow along, but where's everybody else? What's happening? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can ever return. Well, whatever's being depicted on this urn is going to stay the way it is. The people who aren't there can't come back and say, we stepped out for a minute because we went to a party. That's not going to happen. The urn looks the way the urn looks. O Attic shape. Attica is a place, a Greek place. Okay, so something from antiquity. O Attic shape. Fair attitude with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. Breed means the way that those pictures are raised on that. Let's look at it. How they're raised. See how they stand out from that marble? That's breed. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there. Okay. They're overwrought. Of marble men and maidens overwrought with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form. And now, scholars, we're about to the part of the poem that I think is the most important. Now, a lot of times when people read this poem, they pay more attention to the last two lines of this poem. But the more I read it, the more I think they're missing the mark, because I think this is it right here. Right here. Thou silent form dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity. Why do you watch that episode of Friends over and over and over? Why do you like that same part of that song and you try to get it timed up so you can hear that drum lick, or you like the way somebody pronounces a certain word, or you watch that movie over and over and over again for that scene? Because we need to be distracted. Sometimes we need to be teased out of thought. Sometimes we're so worried about what's going on that we need the relief that art can bring us. And it's important, and we can't underestimate it. And I think especially as we've been home during the pandemic, many people that I've talked to and that I've, read online on social media and other things are talking about how important it has been to them to read, to watch movies, to listen to music, to just be distracted from that. And it's a huge thing, and you can't underestimate the importance of it, because it can make life worth living. And it's amazing to see a piece of art, whatever it is, that speaks to you on some level. And I think that's the heart of this point. Thou silent form dost tease us out of thought, as doth eternity. Eternity's big. I just want to be distracted for a minute. Cold pastoral. Well, it's cold because it's made of marble. It's pastoral because it has scenes of shepherds and shepherding and country scenes. We ran into pastoral with Wordsworth. Cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, when everybody dies, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man. Yeah, we can see the urn. We can see the urn Keats saw. I can see one you saw. I can see one that somebody 100, 200, 300 years ago saw, that somebody 1,000 years ago carved. And I can respond to it the same way. And isn't that profound that we could all see it, see the same thing, have the same reaction to it, have a different reaction to it, but have that continuity of human thought and human connection. And it does connect us to the past and to the future. And I think that's part of what Keats is getting at in this poem. So thou silent form dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity. Cold pastoral, when old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. Now, again, a lot of people pay a lot of attention to those last two lines. We don't know if the speaker is saying those lines to the urn. We don't know if those words are carved on the urn. We don't know if that's the whole point of the poem. Beauty and truth are good. I'm not sure that they're the only things that you need to know on earth. You may have a different reaction to them, and that's fine. So that's Ode on a Grecian Urn. If you have some other questions or some other interpretations that you want to explore in your paper and you're unsure about them, or you just want to kind of discuss them with me, you guys know how to get hold of me. So send me an email and we'll talk about this in our discussion rooms too and see what we can't come up with. And as always, I'm just real excited to see what you guys come up with. So thanks for listening.